So have you all ever wondered what would happen if a diehard fan of, let's say, Beyonce and a loyal member of the Beehive became an actual serial killer? Well, the new Prime Video series Swarm might have given us an insight of what that might actually look like. But before we discuss that, I got a quick question for you all.
Who's your favorite artist?
What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're discussing the 7th and final episode of the new Prime series Swarm, and the 7th episode being titled Only God Makes Happy Endings. Now before we discuss and break down this episode, and I'm going to be obviously sharing my thoughts with you all with the series as a whole, make sure you all are leaving your thoughts in the comment section how you felt about this series, as well as sharing your thoughts about the show's story, the themes they tackled, the performances we got, and also go ahead and list some of your favorite moments as well as your favorite episodes in the comments below. And if you all appreciated my breakdown today, consider hitting that like button as well as sharing this video, and of course consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. With all that being said, we got an episode to talk about. Full spoilers ahead. We open in Atlanta, Georgia, June 2018, which is 2 years since we first met Dre back in episode 1. We see Dre has completely changed her look and she now goes by the name of Tony. Now, up until this point in the show, we've seen so many different versions of Dre, as she is a definition of a true shapeshifter, as we've seen Dre go through the various spectrums of feminine and masculine energy throughout this series. Now, Tony meets and helps Rashida and her friends and offers them a ride after they find them at the club, and we cut to going to Rashida's apartment, and she accidentally plays Naja, and she lets Tony know right off the bat she is not a fan of Naja. But we get a much different reaction from Tony from what we've seen from previous episodes whenever someone would have disapproval of Naja, and Tony just kind of lets it go by. She doesn't really make any mind of her not being a fan. And as we learn in this scene right here, Tony doesn't have their phone anymore, and we know how important that phone was to Dre. So it appears that Dre has left her killer persona behind her, and Tony now is sleeping in a car and has a knife by their side, and this is a whole new different version of Dre that we've never seen. Now this scene right here is yet another example of showing how Dre is so much different from Tony, as Tony is watching a video of Naja's hit song playing on the television, and we know every time Dre would see Naja, she would start dancing, she would be in this trance, but we see Tony just kind of smiling to TV and doesn't have that same reaction. But as well as being followed up by this next scene, we see the police looking into Tony's car, which might give an indication to the audience that Tony/Dre is feeling that the police are onto them. Now, as far as the relationship between Tony and Rashida, we see that they have now hidden it off. They're now dating. I found it very interesting that Rashida didn't really see the red flags from Tony, especially with them switching out their cars every so often. But this leads to Tony meeting her parents. This moment here put a big old smile on my face, as I'm such a big fan of this actress. Cree Summers is the mother of Rashida, and the thing I loved about this, if you all follow my channel, you know I covered Atlanta, and on the season finale, Cree was actually in that episode. So I love the collaboration continuing between Donald Glover and Cree, as she's playing the mother of Rashida, and we got the great Norm Lewis who plays the dad, and things seems to be going perfectly for this couple. But this leads into them having their first kind of big fight that we see as an audience, and of course it has to do with Naja, as Tony has bought these front row seat tickets to the new Naja concert that cost over $4,000 instead of getting a anniversary gift that Rashida actually wants from Tony. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the biggest fan of the acting from Rashida in this moment, but I completely understand where she was coming from, because we know whenever Naja gets brought up how Dre would use money. She would literally use you for your money in order to get what she wants from Naja, which is being in her presence. So again, wasn't a fan of the acting, but this moment here when we get the return of Dre as she chokes and kills the love of what I assume was her life, like falling in love with Rashida. We've never seen this type of love from Dre. She chokes and kills her, and if you notice in this scene, that look in Dre's eyes, that's that same look she had when she made all those previous kills dating back to episode 1, as she takes and burns the body of Rashida, but then she realizes those tickets that cost $4,000 are being burnt with the body at the same time. Now, we remember as an audience the last time Dre missed her chance to meet her idol in Naja when we go back to episode 4 when she killed Billie Eilish character Ava and the whole women empowerment cult group. So we know Dre is willing to do anything and everything when it comes to Naja, especially considering the last time she saw her is when she bit her back in episode 3. Now, Dre at this point is looking into any and every way to get into this concert as she comes across this ticket scalper and she kills him. And again, just notice the body language, the way that Dre is carrying herself. The mannerisms are back from all the previous episodes as we see that she sees Naja on stage. And again, she's starting to be like a zombie. Her sole purpose is to get into Naja. Now again, Dre is in this trance and Dre somehow manages to get up on the stage, but she's stopped by security. But we get this surreal moment where Naja stops them from taking Dre. She walks over to Dre and she sees her. And if you notice, the face on Naja isn't really Naja. Now, to be fair, we really never seen the face of Naja throughout the series. We got hints of it, but that wasn't Naja's face. That was Marissa's face as Naja tells Dre to sing. Now, Dre is not singing, but she tells the crowd that she loves them, and the crowd is cheering as we see Naja taking Dre with her as they leave in her car. And we see a moment that Dre has been looking for and just wanting this moment to be fully embraced as she's crying, being hugged by Naja. We end the episode on what appears to be a happy ending for Dre, as there was really only 2 or 3 people that Dre wanted acceptance from, and Naja being one of them. But in reality, we know what happened to Dre back in episode 6, which we'll break down here in a minute. But I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about the relationship between Marissa and Dre when they were kids. Now, going back to that pivotal episode 6, we found out and we got the confirmation of something that was hinted at throughout the episodes and throughout the season, that Dre was adopted by the Jackson family. And we also found out about this situation involving a sleepover and Dre snapping, and she ended up stabbing one of Marissa's close friends, which caused the Jackson to giving her back to the foster family. Now, within that situation, we also found out that Dre was made fun of when she was singing a part of the talent show, and she was just hoping to kind of get discovered like Naja, which would explain why Dre was imagining that moment on stage with her having the audience cheering for her, because when she was a kid, they were booing and making fun of her. But you also have to remember that Marissa, she loved Dre. She accepted Dre for who she is, and she also accepted her as a sister that she always wanted, which is why Dre saw Marissa's face on Naja's face. And also, just going back to that sad moment when she lost Marissa, she lost her sister, and Naja was considered to be a sister in her eyes, and she was kind of filling that void for her. But the big question is, why was Dre so obsessed with Naja? If you all go back to a couple different moments in these previous episodes, one that comes to mind is episode 3, which was titled Taste. We saw at the beginning of that episode, Marissa was kind of fanning out over just watching Naja, and Marissa called Naja a god, she called her a queen, but again, more importantly, she called her a sister. So if you go back to episode 4, which was titled Running Scared, when Ava was trying to get Dre to admit her true identity, she talked about when she first listened to Naja and how death was beauty and equal, but her love for Naja was stemmed in a traumatic situation. Remember, the situation at hand was the red milk and her grandmother was crying. Now, I personally believe that Dre killed her grandmother, but obviously the big question is, why did she do that? But I would imagine there was probably some abuse going on there that might explain why the foster system got involved with taking her in. Now, if you all go back to the caseworker who Detective Green was interviewing, she couldn't really give too many details of what actually happened with Dre and her mother and her grandmother. But before that conversation was ended by the camera guy who was capturing the interview, she had mentioned that Dre's mother may have potentially been murdered. But more importantly, Dre was lonely and she was seeking acceptance. Again, that key word being acceptance. Now, knowing that Dre was seeking acceptance, that doesn't take away or doesn't absolve any of the behavior and the killings that Dre has done throughout this series, but it helps the audience, or at least I'll speak for myself, it helps me understand the need of her accepting from those that she deems to be important to her, right? You think of Marissa, you think of Rashida in this episode, and more importantly, you think of Naja. She's seeking acceptance from these women. But going back to what actually happened in reality at the end of episode 7. So going back to what happened in episode 6, you all remember the article that read that a man ran on stage during the concert and how Detective Green had Tony held in the Atlanta police station. And the story ended up showing that they were pushing to get Dre arrested, and Dre was the main suspect entitled to be a serial killer of at least 8 murders. And everyone from Houston to Nashville to the police in the Little Rock area all reopened their cases, and it also stated that Dre was named to be the main person of interest in all the cases. So it's pretty safe to say that Dre ended up going to jail for all the crimes she committed throughout this season, which I want to also highlight, going back to that 6th episode, which was titled Falling Through the Cracks. That episode was fantastic. And again, going back to my fandom of Atlanta in the final season, season 4, episode 8, which was titled The Goof Who Sat Next to the Door. That episode was incredible in making us think that the person they were covering, which was Thomas Washington, was an actual person that worked for Disney. I was thinking the same thing. So if you all are watching this and if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, was Andrea Green an actual person? Was this a true story? It wasn't. I'm going to break it down here in a second. But again, they did such a great job of making us believe that Andrea Green was an actual person. So kudos to the writers and the directors of that 6th episode, because it was just almost surreal thinking that that was a real situation at hand. So overall, my thoughts on this series, I thought the series did such a great job of showing us how people use celebrities or use artists, in this case Naja, as a tool to create their perfect image of what they imagine is perfection and seeing themselves in that individual. Now Naja, we know in this series, she was far from perfect. As the show alluded to, she was married to a man who was taking advantage of her, but Dre didn't want to see that, nor did she want to hear that. Every time she saw Naja, every time she listened to her music, she considered Naja to be a goddess and considered her to be nothing less than perfect. And if you didn't see the same thing coming from Naja, you were considered to be an enemy in Dre's eyes. So I wanted to share with you all an interview that I read in the Rolling Stones when they interviewed the co-creator of the show, Janine Nabers, as she talks about the idea behind the series and also collaborating with the other co-creator, Donald Glover.
How did the idea for the show come to you, Janine? I understand you're from Houston like a certain pop star. Janine, I am from Houston. Donald pitched the idea directly to me. We knew that we wanted it centered in the world of a Black female perspective. Atlanta was a really personal story for him. Being from Atlanta and wanting to show that side of Blackness and family in Atlanta, and with me being from Houston, we connected the dots to that. It was part of the narrative of him being online and seeing this Black woman tweet, "Why do Black women have to be the pillars in other people's story?"
So another part of this article that I found interesting, which by the way, I'll leave the article in the description of this video, the whole question about how would fans feel that are fans of Beyonce and the Beehive, would they riot, would they feel like offended that this show is kind of coming at them and touching on the topics of fandom, but not just any fandom, toxic fandom, and how it can be so kind of dangerous in today's society. Here's what Janine had to say about that.
Well, at the end of the day, this is a story about Dre, a story about a woman who's going through the grieving process and who connects to two people in her world. When the pilot story happens and she loses a sense of who she is, we see her go full steam ahead on Naja.
Now, I love that quote, and I completely agree, because in my opinion, the show is less about speaking to all fandoms and calling out a particular group of people. Instead, that to me was kind of the background of the show, and in the foreground, the main focus was Dre, her particular situation, her obsession over this pop star, which isn't everyone's story, right? And the big question at hand that I wanted to know from you all is, when it comes to calling Dre like an evil person, now to me, the show never really gives you a definitive answer, and I think it's really up to the audience to make their decision on if you deem her to be evil or bad or terrible. But to me, at the end of the day, I believe that's, again, all up to the audience, but I definitely think the show did a good job of showing us her breaking point, especially in episode 1, and how that set her on this path for the rest of the show. So again, comment below how you feel about the Dre character. Did you ever sympathize with her? Did you just hate what she was doing? Let's have those discussions in the comment section. And also, I find it interesting that the article talked about the whole Beyonce of it all and how she was maybe the template of the show. And Janine went on to say in the article that it was more of an amalgamation of different artists, especially in the Houston area, whether you look at a Beyonce, a Lizzo, a Meg Thee Stallion, who all come from Houston in similar kind of neighborhoods, and they all have a similar DNA within the narrative of this story as well as the music. So I thought that was interesting, but at the same time, I would say this show being titled titled Swarm and the idea of bees being mentioned throughout the series, you can tell Beyonce was more of less the huge influence on our Naja character in this series. Let me know your thoughts on that. Last thing I want to do before we wrap up this video is giving praises to all of the favorite elements that I really adored about this series. First off, the team behind the show, co-creators, Donald Glover, Janine Nabers, and all the various black writers and the black directors did a phenomenal job in showing us a story we rarely see in media today, and showing a black woman being a serial killer. Like, when do we ever see that? So I really appreciated their narratives and the stories they gave us in this show, and giving out the roses to the entire cast and the various cameos and the supporting characters. Some of my favorites, just to name a few: Chloe Bailey I really enjoyed as Marissa. Paris Jackson was hilarious in the episode that she was in. Karen Rodriguez was great. My man Leon. And Billie Eilish, y'all, when she was in episode 4, I thought she was phenomenal. I've never seen Billie Eilish as an actress. I've only seen and heard her music, but I thought that she was very chilling in her role as Ava, which actually brings me to sharing with you all my favorite episodes in no particular order. But I thought the pilot episode was great, a great way to set the tone and show us what we were kind of getting into with this Dre character. Episode 2 with the strippers was just so random, but just I was on the edge of my seat watching that entire episode shake out as we saw Dre was going on a hunt of finding people on Twitter that was talking bad about Naja. Episode 4, though, I think that's my favorite episode because it was extremely creepy as we saw Ava and her empowerment, women empowerment cult group. It was definitely giving me Midsummer vibes. And again, Billie Eilish surprised the hell out of me. And I gotta bring it back to episode 5, which Dominique Fishback, give her the nomination for an Emmy, because just overall, seeing her completely snap and getting the messages from Marissa, who was in her head telling her what to do next and who to kill next. The range that we got from Dominique, from seeing her killing the people, was so terrifying, to having Dre being awkward and so out of touch at points, to me just wanting to grab her through the screen and just give her a hug. I mean, again, the range was so next level, which I want to get to my last point before we wrap this up. Just focusing on her performance to me was so groundbreaking in every way imaginable. She deserves all the praise that I believe will be coming her way after this show comes out. And we've been talking about it on this channel with Pedro Pascal with The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, Jonathan Majors with Kane the Conqueror, and most recently playing Damien in Creed 3, and they're doing their thing. And there's a lot of other great actors doing their thing right now, but Dominique Fishback, I've been a fan of hers for such a long time. She's going to have an amazing 2023 with not only this show, but she's going to be in Transformers later this season. We are living in the year of these great talented people, and I think Dominique Fishback was phenomenal. And when it comes to Dre, to me, she's definitely an iconic character of 2023 so far. So there you have it, y'all. That's the end of my breakdown. I want to take the time to thank you all for watching this video. If you're still here watching, put in the comments right now, hashtag who's your favorite artist, and also go ahead and let me know in the comments who is your favorite artist. Just curious to know. But go ahead and also tell me, what did you all think about the finale, the performances of the show, the story? What were some of your favorite moments, as well as your favorite episodes? Let me know in the comments below. Before we wrap this thing up, if you all enjoyed today's video, make sure you're hitting that like button, sharing this video, leaving your thoughts in the comments, as well as you can see on the screen now, come and join the MovieFiles Hive by clicking the subscribe button and making sure that notification bell is turned on. Check out my review for episode 1 I did for Swarm, as well as my most recent video. Remember, y'all, you are great, stay safe, and we'll see you all on the next breakdown.